Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Mr. Snow, let me ask you one final time. What are the Hunger Games for? Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast. My name is Nate, and this is our spoiler-free review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Special thanks to our friends at Cineplex Pictures and Lionsgate for inviting us to see this movie early for review. If you're joining us for the first time, we are Geekcentric, a podcast focusing on the world of movies, TV shows, games, and all things geek-centric. Joining me for today's review, we have my two favorite tributes, Megan and Justin. How you doing?
Doing well.
Doing well. We're alive.
Yeah, wouldn't do well
alive.
in the games.
I
but,
wanted
you
to
know.
actually, that's literally what because we were talking about this as we were leaving the movie, like who would fare well. So just on the record here, Megan, do you think you would be able to make it as a tribute in the Hunger Games?
No. I'm going to give it that. I don't think I could turn barbaric at all.
But
don't
could you
think
do
I
the
could.
other side of it, right? Like
I could
if you were-
hide.
Could you do like art for people and like, whoa, and then they, you know,
Paint
maybe
a
get more
rock on my
sponsors that way?
face?
Or become a rock person like PETA?
I mean, I could try. I really think that I would just be, this is how I play video games too. I take the sneaky tactic.
Okay.
I never go in guns hot.
Yeah.
I'm
If there's a way
always,
to like sort of
hiding.
like cheap the game, basically.
Sneakily
Yeah.
kill
yeah.
everyone? Sure.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I don't think I'd last very long.
Justin?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd probably I think when people are pushed to a life or death situation, and I think this is what
Yeah.
the movie highlights, is that kind of brings that out of you in a lot of ways, and that's why we see some of these tributes, you know, who are so kind and, you know, nice, and then suddenly they're just vicious, they're animalistic, right? They kind of become what the Hunger Games is meant to do. It brings out that sort of survival.
So you have that in you, Justin?
No, I don't. Again, I haven't. It hasn't been tested, but I don't. Like, and I don't think I would. I don't think I would survive and win. But I think, you know, there's a sense of, you know, if you think about the things that you have in your life
Do
that
what
you
you gotta
want to
do.
fight for, then you'll fight for it. And I think that's
beautiful.
the drive. So, like, yeah, if I was in a situation and it meant that I could see my wife and my daughter again, I would fight to the bloody end until, you know,
Yeah.
I put it in there. So if it meant that I had to, yeah, I'm not someone who would start a fight, but if
Yeah.
you start it, I'll fucking finish it.
He's Marie, the
Hey, calm
little
down.
white kitty in
Yeah.
Aristocrat.
You hear me,
Calm
Nate?
down, bro.
You hear me?
Calm down. Listen, I'm not even up against you in the Hunger Games.
I'm
Okay,
just
I'm sending you
joking.
donations.
I'm just joking.
I am not too proud
Yeah,
to admit
Nate's
that
from the capital.
I'd be living in the capital. I'd be eating macaroons all day and then drinking that stuff that
You'd
makes
have
you
like
sick.
that paint. Yeah, you'd have that like painted look
Oh,
to your
dude.
Yeah.
face, and you'd
Yeah,
have like
No
Tiger King
eyebrows.
Beat me up. I'd look,
You'd have a cape.
dude,
You talk
I'd
like
look
Jo-
awesome.
You'd like talk like James Corden, but like you'd have like a really pompous accent to yourself. Oh, look at him! Look at
Yeah.
him fall on his ass. Oh, it's lovely. That would be you for sure. in the
But I'd
Capitol.
still be a better actor than him in Cats. That said, let's get to the synopsis for this movie. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, follows a young Coriolanus who is the last hope for his failing lineage, the once proud Snow family that has fallen from grace in a post-war capital. With his livelihood threatened, Snow is reluctantly assigned to mentor Lucy Gray Baird, a tribute from the impoverished District 12. But after Lucy Gray's charm captivates the audience of Panem, Snow sees an opportunity to shift their fates. With everything he has worked for hanging in the balance, Snow unites with Lucy Gray to turn the odds in their favor. Battling his instincts for both good and evil, Snow sets out on a race against time to survive and reveal if he will ultimately become a songbird or a snake. Whoever wrote that, kudos to you. This movie is directed by Francis Lawrence, and the movie stars Tom Blythe, Rachel Zegler, Peter Dinklage, Hunter Schafer, Josh Andres Rivera, Jason Schwartzman, and Viola Davis. The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is in theaters November 17th. So I want to talk about what we liked. I want to talk about what we didn't like. I think we'll start with what we liked. And I'd love to kick us off with just talking about the world of Panem that this movie delivers. We're getting a really different, much younger Panem, but it's one that is still clearly ravaged by war, and we get a little taste of that, understanding what that war actually looks like. But then we go, fully into this sort of bloodthirsty early Hunger Games, and I think the movie does a really good job at world building in general to sort of flesh out some of the aspects of the original films. And I think I dug seeing the games in their infancy and seeing just how much smaller they were, but at the same time, kind of like, this is going to be a weird analogy, but kind of like how Nintendo does so much more with so much less. In a very dark way, I found that this version of the Hunger Games was able to do a lot more with less. And I thought that was really intriguing in a very simplistic way, but in a very intriguing, brutal way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I think it was so wild to watch a version of the Hunger Games where the technology was not a player.
Yeah.
That did not come into play yet. It was like, they try things out, they're starting, which was a really fun thing to see referenced, this is new still. And also, the intensity of what at its core the Hunger Games are. You really get all of that stuff stripped back, and this is a raw version of what the Hunger Games are. So that was a really cool thing to see. And like you said, also early Panem right after, or not Panem, Panem's the whole place, but the capital, still very fresh off of war and rebuilding. And, it's its own character that you're seeing in its early stages with a lot of trauma, and they haven't glossed a lot of it out yet. It's so pretty in the first two movies. So
right.
to see it in this
sort of
covered, yeah, exactly, covered in rubble stage still.
It's covered by makeup. Cool. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I feel like it's in the point. It's at the point of rebuilding itself, where we see them in this movie. Whereas, obviously in the Hunger Game movies that have come before it, the capital is fully evolved. It's
so glam.
It's at its status, right? It has its pearly white buildings and tall buildings that look over. It's lush. Here, it's definitely, you use the word infancy. It's definitely in that state of feeling like it's getting out of this war. There's cranes, there's buildings that are still destroyed. I do think, though, the movies spent the previous movies did spend a lot more time showing us the capital than this film did. But that said, you do get, from the small glimpses that they show us, a sense of archaic, dated technology, and just maybe because of recent bias, it feels very TVA. It feels very low TVA technology, where it's new. Like, there's a FaceTime call that was probably the worst FaceTime call I've ever seen in my life. But it was funny how it was interesting how they implemented technology in a way to kind of help date and show some of that differentiation, and how things were still at a point of rebuilding. And also the Hunger Games themselves. Like, we saw the Hunger Games in the original movies with full tech and things that were, holographs and things that were moving and spinning. And, here it's just an arena. Do you know what I mean? So it really does show you the polar opposite of where they came from, which, again, to your point, Nate, like, it's not a lot of world building that we see in comparison to what we've seen before, but it's enough that really does establish we are in a different time period.
But also in ways that inform what we've seen before, right? Like, there's some really subtle callbacks to the original films, and there's also some really not subtle callbacks that we will get to. I will get to when we get to Didn't Like, trust me. But there's little moments, or even costume design touches, that I think go a really long way to keep hardcore fans happy. Like, for me, I loved what they did with Hunter Schafer's character, Tigress, she's also great in the movie, but her character, Snow's cousin, Tigress, her eyebrows, the way that they're sort of, I guess they're bleached out, right? Mm-hmm. And her overall style and her looked very Effie Trinket. Yes. And it's cool to sort of see that, like, maybe we know her as sort of the by the time we see her in the other movies, she is like the out there fashion person, like, that always has just the most amazing looks. And I like the idea that she sort of is creating the trends within the Capitol, so that by the time we get to a character like Effie Trinket, we can see her almost like, it's kind of a retro look, or I was inspired by Tigress. So I think I love those subtle aspects in the way that they can have this movie as a prequel inform the sequel series.
Mm-hmm. And sort of flesh out some stuff, I think, that maybe almost like the way Clone Wars, the animation, shows us stuff we didn't get explained in those Star Wars movies. This gives us information that was, like, not needed necessarily, but they give us the information that we didn't get in those first movies, which is really cool. And I mean, story-wise, just, very, very cool to see story that is, informing a character that we know in a very different light.
Well, he's a one-dimensional character, right? Like, he's not really, like, he's just the villain in those movies. So here we get more dimension to his character that feels, earned and warranted, and validates some of the decisions that he would make in the future. in those movies. So, I think that to your point, the story, I felt far more engaged in this one story, than I did the entire series of movies. I actually really enjoyed it. I think that there was a real intrigue in terms of understanding his character, because where he's going to end up, but you want to know how he gets to where he gets. And when we get to didn't work, maybe it's they could have gone a little bit further with that, because it does feel like this is a bit of a touchstone to more that could happen. But that said, it is really interesting to see the relationships that he had, the things that were motivating him at the time, especially when he's young and he's a student. There's a real sense of learning and earning this character of Snow along the way, that gives a sense of validation and actually gives more appreciation for those movies, and to a certain degree, because I wasn't a fan of those original 4 movies, and I think that this movie was definitely it grabbed my attention a lot more and had me more intrigued. And maybe it was just because of how serious it took itself, and how less teen dramedy it was and more drama, to a certain degree. So I feel like it had the nuances of love romance, but I don't know, people weren't kissing every friggin' 30 minutes to remind us of, like, some weird ass triangle relationship. I don't know.
Sure. There's aspects of some of the romance in the film that works and doesn't work for me. I think overall, though, like, the movie still retains that gritty tone that the franchise is known for, and you've got the messages on, political propaganda, classism, but then there's also more, like, obviously hopeful sides to things with characters like Lucy Gray or Sejanus Plinth, who just really show that humanity isn't fully lost in Panem. And there's some intense moments even before you get to the games themselves in this movie that I just want to make sure people are aware of, that, like, had me sort of, like, thinking, like, it's crazy how we can get away with some of this stuff in a PG-13 movie as far as some of the violence.
That was PG-13.
Yeah, it's a PG-13 movie, and there's
cut away.
I understand, but there are some brutal moments, some brutal kills, some very shocking moments as well. I think I counted at least 4 or 5 jump scares. At least from Megan when she was jumping. I think you hit all of the jump scares.
Every time.
But yeah, no, I think there's definitely, if you're a fan of the tone of the original movies, and I think especially like Mockingjay, I think falls in line with a lot of sort of the themes and stuff that they show in this movie. But I will agree with Justin, maybe not for the first movie, but I do think this movie does do a lot of this stuff better than the sequels, the second, third, and fourth movie.
Absolutely.
I think the as we mentioned earlier, like the limitations of some of the technology they have, I really enjoyed some of the creative and dark ways that, because they don't have that technology, they use the flora and fauna of the world, specifically the way they make use of jabberjays, which hits just as hard as it did, I think, the first time they sort of used them in that way in the franchise. But I'd love to talk about performances, and I'd actually like to pass it over to Justin to start off with. You pick whoever you want to talk about.
Well, I think the standout, even though this is a story about snow, I think is Rachel Zegler as Lucy. Like, I think Lucy Gray, by the way. Sorry, I didn't say
you got to say the full name.
Lucy
Her
Gray.
name is Lucy Gray.
Every time, Lucy Gray.
It's Lucy Gray. I like at first introduction, she's sort of playing the damsel in distress motif a little bit. Then she kind of leans into this sort of strength and heart that her character has, and I think she actually was a showstopper. She stole the show in a lot of ways, and I think she did a great job with what she was given and how she acted it, and I think she kind of brought a sense of theatricality to it that really did work and fit for the motif of the Hunger Games. And I think she was great as that. But on the parallel, to just juxtaposing that, you have someone like also who was just so intense on screen was Viola Davis. And I think she was a very interesting antagonist amidst this group of high life capitalists who are running this game. I think she was the game master. Game master, yeah. So she was terrifying. So those were two standout performances in my mind. But like you said, the entire cast was solid,
phenomenal.
Yeah. I think Viola Davis, I think, was the first moment I actually got chills in the movie, was when she speaks. It might have been one of the few moments that I got chills, but it was still very chilling. She's horrifyingly evil. She's playing such a classic villain, but not in a cheesy way. In a way that still, like, her line delivery still has such weight to it, and I think we get so much more of her than I anticipated, and I'm really happy to say that. I think you can really see where Snow finds his inspiration in her, and there are a few sequences with her where I couldn't just help but just stare at her, even if she wasn't speaking, because she gives this, like, her costume design is incredible. She's everything you'd want in a mad scientist, but add capital fashion onto that. You know what I mean? Like, she's got like these deep red gloves and her hair and her freaky eyes. Oh.
She's so demented. She's so demented, and you think about it, you'd have to be demented to be a game master.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
To think of ways that how can people kill each other?
That.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, and to come up with that. So, she's great in everything she does, and she delivers in this movie. It was so good.
Megan, was there anyone that stood out for you that you wanted to kind of highlight?
I mean, like, I'm glad I get to be the one to talk about this first, because I will say one of my favorite characters in the original Hunger Games movies is Stanley Tucci's Flickerman. And we love a second Flickerman by Jason Schwartzman. He is the absolute perfect comedic relief in this very intense movie. He plays Stanley Tucci's character. It's obviously not the same guy. I think
might
maybe
be an
his
ancestor?
grandfather or
they're both
something.
Flickerman.
Yeah, but he plays his own version of the very first host of the Hunger Games, and I think that is like so fun to see him like trying new things and like seeing how he can make this his show, and he's so funny and so strange and quirky, and it's very entertaining to watch, and I think very necessary in movies like this that can be so weighted and heavy and very intense when we're talking about the human experience. And he's so light and fun and silly. So I absolutely loved him. There was no weak point in his performance at all, in my opinion. It was super, super fun to watch him on screen.
Yeah, he seems to steal every scene
absolutely
that he's in. And I think, but it's funny because, yes, it is funny, but it's also like the darkest parts of the Capitol propaganda machine rolled up into a newscaster. Like he's a newscaster at the end of the day, but I like the most laughs in our screening, and I think out of any audience, I think will come from everything he does. And I love how he's the only one who is so into what he's both saying or doing at the time, more than anyone else in the room. He's the one that's enjoying himself the most. And yeah, he's Caesar Flickerman. He's standing right alongside Stanley Tucci in that style of role, and he's just so damn good.
Yeah, and I also think we can't talk about the performances without mentioning the great Peter Dinklage.
Oh.
Not on screen as much as I thought he was going to be in this movie, but fantastic. Every single second he was there. He demands the audience. He demands your attention, and he is so powerful in his role. And also there's a strange turn of events with him. Can I say that?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. He's not who I thought he was, which was fun because I wasn't expecting him to be who he was.
Yeah, he reminded me a lot of like Bradley Whitford's character. I mean, this might not hit for you, Megan, but in The Handmaid's Tale, they're just these men who are in a specific point in their life where they're just reconciling with what they helped to create. And you see that in his performance. You see that in every single moment. I think, to your point of we didn't get as much of him as you expected. We didn't get as much of him as I wanted after seeing him in the first few minutes. He's so integral to the major moments of the plot of this movie that I think it's unfortunate that there just wasn't that little bit more of him that I think could have really helped to round out some of the character motivations and moments in the film, especially throughout like the third act. Justin, was there anyone else? I mean, we got to talk about Tom Blythe, obviously our Snow.
Yeah, Tom Blythe was great. I think he he definitely had a sense of uncertainty about what was right, what was wrong. I think obviously, as we know where his character will end up, he sees the bigger picture.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
Right. He sees the bigger picture and he understands what's going to happen. But I think he, again, much to what Rachel Zegler brought, I think Tom really does bring a very emotive performance that felt more real and grounded than any of the acting that ever came from those movies before in a lot of ways. And I think that's what I appreciated from this movie is that...
You're a J-Law. You should be a fan of J-Law, Justin.
I am a fan of J-Law. I'm just not a fan of J-Law in Hunger Games because I rewatched these movies leading into this and I was just as disappointed with those movies as I was way back when everyone was going like, oh, Hunger Games. I'm like, I don't know what's so crazy about it. But I do think that, again, this entire cast delivers a very, again, emotive, very grounded, gritty performances that feel tangible and yeah, some of them might feel a little caricature-esque, like Viola Davis's character might feel like that, but there's just such an energy and such a dementedness to her performance that it feels really real. Yeah, and it works really, really well. And then like on the other side of that, like we talked about Hunter Schafer and how sincere and how soft and gentle she is. She is so she's so great in this movie. I think. Yeah, I want to see more of her because she's in Euphoria and I love her in there in that show. She's a much different character. So to see her in something like this, there's just such a great sense of sort of honesty to her performance, very much like how she's in Euphoria, but just on a different level. Just she almost seems like the voice that can connect to Snow in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think that voice you see it in Tom Blythe's performance. It's sort of in the back of his head. There are a lot of moments where you do get to see him feel hope, and you see his in his emotive performance, like you're saying, Justin. Like his there's haunting moments. There's moments that are scary, and you start to see the Snow that he will become. And I think for the most part, I think. His performance absolutely works. I think Rachel Zegler's performance, I think she's captivating it a lot of times as well in her performance. Her accent took a little bit for me to kind of get over. I I understand that maybe that's baked into the character. I haven't read the books. If it was a choice, I think it was the wrong one. But other than that, I get that it adds to her charm of her character, and she's supposed to be like this charming, like Southern kind of.
But see, I also think though, because the character of Lucy Gray is very much a performer. You hear the accent go up in sort of a performance stance, but when she is talking with, Snow and other people, it's less
She
obvious.
doesn't put it on as much.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. So maybe that's where I was a little.
But I think
aback.
that makes sense for at least it worked for me, because at the times when her accent was really thick, it was usually in a performative level.
I just don't know if I would send as many donations to her as a Capital resident until she started singing, because I do think her singing is
beautiful,
really beautiful in this movie.
Yeah, they lucked out.
You can tell why she was Maria.
I think there's a reason.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on to didn't like, I do just want to also shout out Josh Andres Rivera in this movie, who plays what's his name? Sejanus. The names, by the way, names in the Capitol. Crazy name. But he plays Sejanus, and he actually reminded me, I don't know if you guys got this, but he reminded me a lot of a young Vincent D'Onofrio, both in how he looks, but also his acting capability. Like, I just got this like vibe from him that was very D'Onofrio-esque.
I can see, I've Googled now Vincent D'Onofrio, and I can see the look part of it.
Yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio, Daredevil, right? I don't know. I got a lot of that from him, and I think he's a standout. Like, I think I enjoyed what he did in West Side Story, and there's some really powerful moments here that, again, like we're talking about, like feeling that emotion. Like, I think in Zegler's performance when she's singing, you really see it. And I think anytime this guy talks, you can tell there's so much like sort of so much stuff going on in his mind of that weight, and very similar to Dinklage's character of sort of feeling so much responsibility for what's going on,
and guilt
immense amounts of guilt. Yeah,
and he's just I thought he was really, really fantastic. So just wanted to shout him out as well. But let's get to maybe some of the things we maybe didn't enjoy. I kind of want to start with some of the moments of dialogue really stood out as forced in certain moments, very awkward. Trust me, I'm a sucker for callbacks, okay? And I love references to previous things. I'm a hardcore Star Wars fan, so I know the difference between subtle and forced callbacks. And again, there's some really great subtle callbacks to the original movies, but there are also some that I think, when in our screening at least, brought out audible laughs in certain moments where you could just like, people were feeling so uncomfortable by the line of dialogue that they laughed. And it unfortunately, it takes away from what would be really good moments with the characters on screen, with Lucy Gray, with Snow, and very like heartfelt moments. But they have to sneak in these little references or these little moments of dialogue that just don't work. Again, there's subtle ones that work really well with like certain things that are placed in the arena, or certain gestures that characters do, and certain costume moments like I talked about. But there are also just these ones that just, I don't know, they rub me the wrong way.
Cringy hearing some of them.
Yeah, I rolled my eyes a couple times at certain moments where I was just like, okay, that was a little heavy-handed. Whereas the other things were really, they were planted well, right?
Yeah.
Little things that were more in the background, things that might have just been said and you hear, Obviously, I don't think it's any spoiler to say that, the song Hanging Tree that's featured in the first one, it's heavily featured here. And I enjoyed that as a thread. And I think what they do really well with some of these elements is really create a parallel from this period of time and to those films that would take place in the future, and why District 12 was so important to why District 12 might have meant something more to Snow, why that song meant something more to Snow. I think in a lot of ways it serves to sort of validate, like you were saying, Meg, validate some of those elements. But then you get like some really, like you guys were saying, cringeworthy, eye-rolling, like, God, that could have been handled so much better, right? Or even just things that are just like, why are you calling it that? Like, it just didn't make any sense whatsoever.
There were like expositional but unexplained
references
that were like, why did you do that?
Yeah. My biggest pain point with this movie, which I think is the pain point for all of us, is the final act of this movie. The third act of this movie is so misplaced from the rest of the movie. The first two acts cook, man. Like they're good. The pacing's good. The acting's good. I'm feeling engaged. And then you get to this third act, and it just grinds this movie to a halt. It just stops. The momentum stops. It feels tonally different. It feels like a whole other movie in itself that's just kind of tacked on to what was a very, I think, energetic first two acts that had me engaged and I was like really interested in. And then, the final act just grinds, and there's probably really important elements that are obviously very key to Snow's development and character.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if like either they were given enough time or too little time. That again, it could have just been its own movie. It could have been part two of this story. And I think that probably would have been the better way to go, rather than condensing it to what was probably an hour or less of time and just tacking it on to the end of this movie. And I think that's where like suddenly I was like looking at my watch in that final act. I'm like, okay, this can wrap up any time now. I think we've seen the best parts, but it kept going.
Yeah. You're talking about pacing in the first two acts. It's fast. It's good.
It's Hunger Games.
Ready.
Yeah.
You're there. It's intense. And then all of a sudden this third act feels slow, but then also you don't get enough time with the story and the character development and the need for that, so that the end is important, and it feels very disjointed, and just like a big pacing problem at the end.
Yeah, we get some really sort of sharp, let's just say, decisions made that I just find that like they're not justified enough, or at least they don't feel like they are, and I think it lessens the impact of the finale too much. I think that, I really enjoyed the ideas that are in that third act, but like you're saying, Justin, it should have been two movies, which is unfortunate because Francis Lawrence said in an interview that Suzanne Collins suggested that out of all the movies, that this one, because it's based off the longest book, should have been split into two films. But he said that there was so much backlash against Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2 that he's like, I don't want to repeat that. I'm just going to make a long movie. So I can't be too upset at that decision. I understand it. But the difference is at that time, you had all these movies coming out where their finales were being split into a Part 1 and Part 2. So A, it was trendy. B, studios probably saw like, oh, that's going to make more money for us.
Twice as much money. Yeah.
Right? But the major difference narratively and from a plot standpoint is you have a thin story that you are making, you're spreading out into two movies unnecessarily, and here you have a thick story that really should have been split up. It's too thick.
Too many C's.
And I just found it really, really unfortunate, and again, it takes the wind out of your sails a little bit when you're watching this movie, for sure. It
totally does. It sucks out all the energy that you had for those first two acts, and you're just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Right? It's trying to be like a moody character study final act, and it just, there's just not enough there to actually like again, there's probably very key important elements, but I think that because of the pacing of that final act and how rushed it is, things are glossed over. Things are just like, okay, accept, let's move on kind of thing. And in the first two acts there was a little bit more time to intention to get to specific moments. There's just none of that in the final act.
Yeah. And I think, my personal experience was very intense and a lot of adrenaline running through my body. Like I could smell my sweat because I was sweating so much watching this intense second act. And then, when you get like super amped up.
I could smell my sweat. No, second act.
But, when you get like so hopped up and so like such a big adrenaline rush that then you're like cold and shivery because your body's like coming down from this crazy high. That's what I felt in the third act. I was like, oh, now I'm like cold and disconnected because I was so intense, and then it just sort of had to fizzle, and I don't have the energy anymore. And it was unfortunate.
Yeah. And it's like, it's almost an hour long, and yet they still choose to make these things go by so quickly that just even further proves the fact that there's so much story that they could tell. And again, these really important parts for Snow's life. Just before we get to our wrap up, I do want to just quickly mention the visuals, and not in a positive way. I think, again, the early age of Panem and the Hunger Games, the tech that they do is really well done. Justin, you mentioned the TVA and some of the aspects that felt similar there. I think it's scaled back enough where they've got a small arena and very limited ways to engage with the tributes. And I enjoyed how at times it felt like an old school telethon that you would see where they're raising donations, and especially with Flickerman there. But I just felt as though the environments that they're in were so green screened, and when you've got the chance to show a scaled back version of these movies and these environments, you got to go more practical. And I don't know what the budget was for this movie. I'm not sure. I think it's a Hunger Games movie, so I would imagine it's big, but maybe it went mostly to the cast. But like, there were just so many moments where I was like, the movies from over a decade ago, there were moments that looked much better there than they did in this one. And I don't know. I would have loved just a little bit more practical, because I think they could have achieved that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about seeing Panem or the Capitol in this totally separate, different early generation. And it was cool, but also, like, we saw very little of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know the movie wasn't about the Capitol, but also it kind of was. Mm-hmm. And I think we only really ever saw that fountain square in 3 different states. We saw it in the war before the Hunger Games inception. We saw it in these early stages, fresh off of war, fresh winners of the war. Mm-hmm. And then nearing the direction towards those first Hunger Games movies, but only ever in that one little section with the fountain.
It's very synthetic looking.
That's it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I think that stood out as a very synthetic, like very fake shot. I think the arena at certain points did.
Reminded me a lot of like Attack of the Clones arena.
District 12 too.
Yeah.
With the stacks, like the.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah, I could see that. I don't think I noticed it as much there because you had like probably a little bit more of like natural space that you're kind of blending into. But like there's an action set piece that happens in that arena, and it's like, well, this is all CGI.
Yeah, they're climbing on green boxes there for sure.
Well, for sure, maybe, but like that sort of stuff, it makes more sense for that to be practical, like rocks and stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's a big event that happens in that arena. And, people are standing around, and it's like, that is all just CGI, right? Like, and it just screams CGI. So, I think the allotment of budget was probably given to this cast because they're the best thing to celebrate about this movie.
Well, let's celebrate them one last time as we give our final thoughts and rating for this movie, which we're going to be rating on a scale of 1 to 5. Swamp potatoes. That's for hardcore Hunger Games fans who've read the books and know a little bit about what that means, but we won't spoil it for obviously people that don't know what swamp potatoes are. But go ahead, Megan. How many swamp potatoes are you giving this movie?
Well, we talked about the performances being really fantastic. Hard to pick out much that was wrong there, and I think it's okay that those shone because this was a performance-driven movie. It was all that really you needed to see, a lot of close-ups. Mm-hmm. So it was obviously meant to be specifically about the characters. The background wasn't that necessary. I don't like a cringy moment, so it was hard to deal with some of those callbacks. And like I said, I had a huge adrenaline rush halfway through the movie, and then it just fell super flat. So I am probably not going to go see this movie again on purpose. Mm-hmm. If it's like pops up and I'm in a Hunger Games mood, maybe I'll watch it again. So I'm going to give this 2.5 swamp potatoes.
Oof.
Damn.
5.
Okay.
That was low. I thought you were higher than that.
All right, Justin. No, I know you're super high all the time.
All the time.
How many swamp potatoes are you smoking?
I feel like, again, as I was mentioning, this movie delivers a solid first 2 acts with a momentum that kept me engaged and that felt very Hunger Games, and different in the sense of there's tension and there's excitement, and it's around characters. Like we were saying, it's less around the actual Hunger Games, but it's more about the characters, and I really appreciated that. I think the story had depth, and it featured outstanding performances, as we mentioned, from the entire cast. I think Tom and Rachel, their chemistry at times was very captivating, and then, as we mentioned, the last act, it just kind of rolled into like, here we are. Viola Davis was devilishly evil, and I think Hunter Schafer was fantastic, and she was definitely another standout. But yeah, Rachel Zegler, she stole the show for me. I think she definitely delivers a very emotional performance. I think she's definitely learning as she goes with this whole acting thing, and she brought the best that she could towards it, and I think she knocked it out of the park. But like I was saying, the fault of this movie is the last act, and it really just it's how much it grinds to a halt, and slows the momentum down. It feels like an entirely different movie from the first two acts. But even with that, though, I would still say that this is the best of the Hunger Game films.
Wow.
So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 swamp potatoes.
Look at you. Okay. I've been a fan of these movies since the first one from over a decade ago. I even read the first book, and if anyone knows me, I don't read. So that was pretty big. The book is better than the movie, sorry to say. But I will say I was so captivated by the ideas in this series back then, and I still am. And I think as the movies went on, you could start to see the faults in them, but it didn't stop me from overall enjoying the film. I think I'm in that same place here for the first two acts of the film. I think the performances, obviously, like we've been talking about them from the majority of this cast, the world building, the brutality of the simpler Hunger Games, I think really works to hit the nostalgic beats for hardcore and casual fans. But the final chapter of this movie just goes so far out of its way to stuff additional story in that they don't even take too much time to really flesh out, even though it feels like a really long time. And I just felt like it did a disservice to these characters and their ending. And I think Suzanne Collins was right. I think this should have been 2 movies. I think if you're really into Hunger Games, you're going to enjoy it no matter what. I think if you're like wearing the pins like I was, you're going to be like, yeah, I rock with this movie. And I do, for the most part. I think I do rock with this movie. I just think that like even if you are like a hardcore Hunger Games fan, you're gonna feel the length of the end of this movie, and it's gonna cause you to lose that energy that you would get from that first half. I think you'd have to be really dedicated to still be super hyped at the end of the film, I think. And if you are, that's great for you. But for me, I'm giving The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a 3 out of 5 swamp potatoes. I was actually sitting at a 2.5 earlier, and I think as we started talking about the performances and that cast, it really brought me up, because again, it's rare that I feel chills when a character speaks, but shout out to Viola Davis. Come on. So good. But that is it for this spoiler-free review of The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts, if you haven't already. And if you want to write into the show with your thoughts on this movie or any of the shows or movies we cover, well, I nominate Justin as tribute, so he can tell you how you can reach us.
Well, they can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach out to us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at GeekcentricYT, or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
It's just calling it X now. That's where we're at.
Weird.
X gonna give it to you, bro.
Apparently. Keep in mind, we also have a ton of other episodes covering the latest releases, like our spoiler-free reviews for the Netflix series Blue Eye Samurai, Invincible Season 2 Part 1, David Fincher's The Killer, Goosebumps episodes 1 to 5, and The Creator. We also have some great interviews out now, like our most recent interviews with the creative team behind Loki, where Justin had the chance to sit down and speak with Dan DeLeo, who's directed episode 2, Kazra Farahani, who directed episode 3, is also the lead production design on the show, and Christine Wada, who was the mastermind behind the excellent costumes on the show. So he chats with all of them. He talks about their individual journeys within the production, as well as the collaboration that they all sort of worked on the show together, and different aspects of that collaboration in crafting Loki Season 2. So check out those interviews and all of our interviews either here on your podcast service of choice or over on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. Plus, we're going to continue with our watch club for Loki Season 2 with episode 6 later this week, I guess, or next week we'll have the watch club out. But the episode on Disney Plus, the finale, should be out tonight if you're listening to this on the day that we've released this review. Also, join our Discord. We'd love to talk to you about this movie on the Discord. We'd love to talk to you about Loki or anything that we cover. You can join our Discord using the link in our description. And that's it. Megan, Justin, thank you so much for joining me for this hungry review. And as we say, Peter, love ya.
Bye.
Peace.